Hi, I'm Slice.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to another episode of Home Records, the podcast where we, two married musicians, pick an album at random from our 2,000-piece vinyl collection and discuss its personal and cultural importance. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am doing very, very well. I woke up, I had coffee, I had a protein shake, I listened to Japanese folk rock music. Life is good on a Sunday morning.
As is your new hobby, Japanese folk music. You're on quite a kick.
Well, a lot of Japanese music, Japanese rock, Japanese city pop, Japanese jazz fusion, which is par for the course from our last episodes.
Yeah, we highlighted a few of those, but today we're going a different route. We're not doing anything Japanese. Although, hint, this artist does get a lot of influence from Japanese music.
Yes, this artist very much loves a lot of things Japanese. I remember when sometime, I think she was probably on tour, she would just post on her Instagram just vacation reels and photos of her being in Japan.
Yeah.
You know, quite a bit. And of course, the artist we are referring to is country starlet Kacey Musgraves.
Yeah, I love her.
Yes.
I'm actually so pumped for this episode. I've been waiting for this episode. I've been excited for this episode because we're covering one of my favorite records of all time.
Yes, and it's in fact one of my favorite albums as well. It's in my, I think it's my second favorite album of the 2010s.
Yeah, and not even like in country.
Yeah,
just
overall,
it's
it's one of my favorite albums of the 2010s. The one that is my favorite album I think we're going to get to in another episode. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Place your bets now. But so unlike some of the other records we talked about, or most of the other records we talked about, this one is one that you are also extremely familiar with.
I know. I know. I was saying before we got on here, I was like, I didn't actually have to listen and take a ton of notes before.
It's funny
because I've listened to this record so much in my life already, which is fun for me.
I do own this album on vinyl, but it's not currently in our house. I actually have it at my work office where I teach, because I usually put some vinyls there in my shelf, and they're like probably the albums that I feel like are the most classic, that I could be like, oh, check these out, guys, because these are the sauce,
the ones to live up to,
pretty much. So Golden Hour by Kacey Musgraves, that is the album we are talking about. Came out in, I believe, 2018, and
which is a while ago now. Like
it's almost 8 years ago.
But yet, to me, if that came out tomorrow, it would still feel super fresh.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to get into this, talking about, creatively, this was very much a peak for Kacey Musgraves, and this was very much a departure from what she's done previously as well. Yeah. And thematically, there's a lot of things in this record that were different than she did before. And some that she retained afterwards in some ways, musically, in other ways different. So we're going to get into all of that.
Yeah. So for someone who maybe hasn't listened to this record, let's talk about why this record was kind of a shift for Kacey. First off, just where she was at in her life. This is her love record. Mm-hmm. She wrote this when it was like she was just getting married, or she had just gotten married to Rustin Kelly at the time.
She had started writing it when she met Rustin.
Yeah.
Which they, funnily enough, met at Douglas's Corner, which unfortunately no longer exists. It was a pivotal and cornerstone of local live music.
I didn't know they met at Douglas Corner. Mm-hmm. Can I tell my crazy Douglas Corner story?
Yes.
Okay, so Douglas Corner, as Slice says, used to be a very iconic, writers' rounds and songwriter joint in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And when I visited Nashville for the very first time, that was what I was trying to do. I was trying to go to a place that was super iconic. I was actually here on a mission trip, not even here for a writer's thing. Like I was in high school. And the church team I was on said, Emily, you're in charge of like our day out. What do you want to go do? And so I like researched iconic songwriting venues to go to. And I picked Douglas's Corner because of its reputation.
Mm-hmm.
I have never had a weirder experience in my life. I went to this round and this guy who was like, he looked like Gandalf.
Yep.
I'm not kidding you.
Yep.
He looked like Gandalf. He had the staff
Mm-hmm.
and he proceeded every time his round hit him, he proceeded to do a spoken word poetry about like fantasy.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this?
Yeah, the open mic rounds at Douglas's Corner can get very chaotic and very unhinged almost very quickly. And I remember because when you go there, you sign up. You had to get there dirt early, more or less, like an hour early. You sign up, and you basically get picked to go up in a lottery system. But the thing is, they go through everybody who signed up. So rounds could be going until 1 or 2 in the morning, on a good night. And
Yeah.
that's in quotation marks. But exactly. So you sign up, and everybody does 2 songs. I think.
Yeah, something
not
like
just
that,
not just
yeah.
one song. They do 2 songs. So you never know who you're going to be in the round with. You never know what kind of. I remember, I think when I did it, not in the round I was in, but one of the guys that was in this round, I saw him one other time somewhere else, I guess he claimed to be like a twice removed relative of George Harrison. And so he did this like sort of parody of Here Comes the Sun. I can't remember what it was, but I
Strange.
remember that, but that was the thing in Nashville. That was the thing you did. I mean, like Kacey probably had done that at least a handful of times.
Yeah.
When she came out here. She's originally from Texas, and she
Well-
did the Nashville thing, when she was in her teens.
And it's so funny to me. So Douglas Corner is an icon. It was an iconic songwriting
No longer
venue,
exists, unfortunately.
but by the time I moved to Nashville, it was already gone. So
Right.
my one
Yep.
experience
Yeah, well,
is Gandalf,
and that's
it just cracks me up.
but it's absolutely a Nashville experience. It's absolutely
Yeah.
par for the course, for that. But anyways,
Anyway, I got
So-
us sidetracked. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, that's all right.
I thought that was an important memento to share.
It very much is. It very much is. Absolutely. So yeah, no, Kacey met Rustin there of all places, and
Yeah.
Rustin had kind of started dipping his toes in the solo record. He was just about to write his own, breakthrough record as well. But yeah, when they met and they started having their romance, that's when Kacey started writing this record, Golden Hour.
Yeah.
And
it's very different. I mean, she doesn't, I will say this about a lot of female country singers and writers in general, is that they don't really write about love. And so I love that this whole record is about budding romance. Obviously that romance didn't last. They're now divorced. And we
Well-
love Rustin Kelly. We'll say that. We love them both.
yes, they are both fantastic artists. They put out some great work in Star-Crossed. Anyways,
But this record, it just captures that. I really think those first few moments of really falling in love. Also just, it captures her history kind of growing up. I feel like there's a lot of growing up songs on this record too.
There's very much a nostalgia factor to this record.
Yeah.
Which tends to happen when you're talking about romance and falling in love in the moment, which is very much that's very much a nostalgic rite of passage feeling or experience that everybody has, both requited and unrequited. In this case, it's actually a requited love record, which I feel like are pretty underrated. I think they don't get enough credit. It's very easy to talk about. It's very easy to talk about how we are so in love, we're so in the moment, and then there's the inevitable heartbreak because they don't feel the same way.
Yeah.
So and you hear about that all the time, but then there's not enough, I think, albums that really deeply, and I think, in my opinion, with depth, really talk about, the positive feelings and experiences that all relates to.
Well, I feel like you almost have albums and music comes from emotion, and you have so much more emotion when you're going through a breakup or unrequited love or something that's really intense. Like, I feel like you have so much more to say. And so a lot of times I do feel like those albums are better. But the truth is when you're meeting someone that you think is going to be a really serious partner.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much self-development work, I think, that you go through when you're entering into a really serious partnership to try and become the best version of yourself. Like, we talk about that all the time. There's nothing like being married or being in a serious committed relationship that makes you like evaluate yourself and grow as a person. I think it does that more than anything else you can go through. And you see so much of that on this record of her like diving into like Slow Burn is a look back on her past and like where she's come from, and Lonely and Sad is looking at her psyche.
Or Happy and Sad.
I'm sorry. The other one's about being lonely.
Lonely Weekend, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it does. It is an album where she's reflecting on her past for sure. Although, in my perspective, I think it's still her in that kind of post puppy love stage. You know, there's very much that. The reality hasn't quite hit yet, but you know, it's sort of, the whole album is just about, you know, looking back so that you know you're ready to you're having all these emotions and you're ready to accept them and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And the thing with Kacey is that talk about her previous work up to that point is, you know, she was very much, you know, sort of the up and coming progressive country singer songwriter. Her first album, Same Trailer Different Park, which I remember buying because I remember she performed it at the Grammys and she beat out Taylor Swift for the best country Grammy for that record, and it's a phenomenal record. A lot of her songs from those first two records, they tend to be, you know, very, very fun, very funny, very tongue in cheek, you know, very turn of phrase lyrically. You know, that was because that's the tradition she came from. You know,
I write stuff like that. Country, definitely, especially country female songs are very tongue in cheek. They're very. She does a lot of metaphor,
but not with a lot of country pop production that was, you know, very widely popular at the time. She was trying to do something very different, and I love those first two records. I saw her in concert on the Pageant Material tour twice, and I love that record. I think that's an underrated record that really doesn't get talked about enough. There's a couple songs, great songs on it: "Late to the Party," "Somebody to Love." So from there, I remember seeing interviews with her talking about Golden Hour and saying like, yeah, I just wanted to do something different. I didn't want to, you know, I love this kind of country songwriting, but I wanted to, you know, do something different, maybe evolve from that a little bit, because this is not, there's country elements to this record, but it's very much even a departure from those previous records musically. And a lot of the songs flow in this kind of almost song cycle type of type of flow, and that's large in part to her working with these producers, Daniel Tashian and Ian Afichuk, I think that's how you pronounce his name, top of my head, and it was a different sound. And she chose to work with them as opposed to previously with like Shane McNally and Josh Osborne, who actually did contribute songs with Kacey on this record. One of them being Space Cowboy, which was the first single. That one and Butterflies were the first singles. And I remember the day those came out, and Space Cowboy, I probably listened to that song 20 times that day it came out. It's one of those songs where lyrically it feels like it's too clever, but because sometimes you can listen to lyrics and they're like kind of too clever that they, you know, sort of get up their own, ask me no questions. But but this one avoids that somehow, and it's kind of hard to explain why, but I just remember I also very much personally resonated with that song at the time too.
Oh man, I just love this record so much.
I listened to this record incessantly, especially because I bought it on vinyl the day it came out from Grimes, because it came out when right after I moved to Nashville. It came out, and I bought it, and that kind of, you know, really was, you know, it was my album of the year, but it was really the album of sort of me really kind of starting to move forward in really getting acquainted with Nashville, even though it's not what I would call very like a Nashville record.
It's not a Nashville record.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
Her previous records, you could kind of see that, but with this one, even though I believe it was recorded in Nashville, it was so different. But it definitely, there was a lot of influences in it that that were familiar to me. But it also, in some ways, I think broke new ground in terms of being part of the country genre. Because I won the Country Grammy and one Album of the Year Grammy, there's all these things, but just as a standalone record with music overall, it really connected with people.
So I have two things, and then I want to get into the tracks, like the nitty-gritty of the tracks. But I have two things before that. First, we said something I want to go back to. We said this isn't a Nashville record, and I can just picture somebody who isn't in the Nashville music scene that doesn't know what that means. Can you like explain a little bit more what we mean by that? Because I know what we mean by that, but I'd be curious to hear your response.
Well, this is a very artist-focused record. It's not your typical like Music Row, studio musician just banging out a track kind of record.
Because Nashville can feel like a music factory.
Yeah,
it can feel like we know the formula for a hit. We're going to create a record around that. It's built to sell millions of copies. And we know the formula, and this record is not produced that way.
It's not at all. No, and even though some of the collaborators have delved into that area of country, some more than others, this very much stood out. And there were a few albums around that time that did the same thing. Like Sturgill Simpson's "Sailor's Guide to Earth" was another one of them. That won the Country Grammy the year after, or actually it might have been That one 2018 and Golden Hour won 2019 because of the release date cycle. Yeah, so there was this whole thing happening where the country albums that were getting the most wide general public recognition were not your typical Music Row records. And which is, like you said, it could be formulaic. You hinted at that earlier. And that's why this album really stood out, is because it really did its own thing, but it did it in a very sincere and focused way. And that's what I said about Kacey when she was coming out, in pageant material. I remember I went to go see her in LA, and there was this guy that was doing like interviews with fans for like a radio thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said is like, I think she's the most sincere country artist since Vince Gill.
I've never put it that way. I think that's an interesting, there's a sincerity there.
Mm-hmm. And that's why this album holds up. I mean, it's why this album, I think, resonated, but I think that's why it holds up, because there's still something very pure and honest about it,
Yeah.
Without being like insipid or just overly sentimental.
I mean, I think for me, like, as an artist myself, Kacey, this record to me is the gold standard for modern country albums. When I think about writing my album, I think about this album during that process, because I think about this and I think about 21 by Adele. Like, there are just certain records that I think are perfect records, and I think this is one of them. And when it comes to country records, and the kind of country records I want to make, this is pretty close to perfect in terms of like sincerity and authenticity, and just that autobiographical singer-songwriter. I opened my journal, I shared it in hopes that somebody would feel seen. Like, that's always been my hope and my mission, and I feel like this record does that so well. It's such a good North Star to kind of shoot for as writers in this genre specifically.
Absolutely. And the one extra thing I would add on to that real quick is that it's very progressive.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, both musically compared to, country that's before,
absolutely,
and lyrically as well. It's a very forward-thinking country record.
Yeah. It allows you, like, when you listen to it, it's like, oh wow, somebody was able to take the risks. Somebody was able to say, production-wise, I'm going to do something different and authentic. When somebody else does that and is successful doing that, it just gives you permission to take the ball further down the field.
Absolutely. And I think it did that for me as a songwriter at the time, because I I was also trying to do kind of the Americana thing when I moved here and tried to be that songwriter. You know, at some point, a few months into being in Nashville, and part of that was listening to Golden Hour, but part of it was listening to other things. And I'm like, I just need to write whatever I feel like, you know? And this record does that. So now,
one other thing I wanted to talk to you, and then I want to get into the tracks.
Yes.
The one other thing, because people may not know anything about this record, we talk a lot about records that were not recognized when they came out. This record is the exception to that. Yep. This record was very well received when it came out. It won not only the Grammy for Best Country Record, it won Best Album of the Year.
Right.
Which I can't remember how long it had been since country records don't win Best Album of the Year, guys. It just doesn't happen. It's a very niche genre. So can you talk a little bit about how this record was received when it came out and why it was so kind of...
I mean, it was a number one album.
Yeah.
It was universally well received and well recognized outside of the country sphere.
Right.
Because here's the thing you have to understand, listeners, is that what some people might not know about me is that I really go out of my way to explore all the big records that come out.
You really do.
Absolutely. Come out in the year, and that's every genre. But country is kind of weird, and some R&B is also a little bit weird to hear too, is because, you hear about these records and you hear about them like from big name artists like Ashley McBryde or Keith Urban.
Yeah.
But the thing is that their records are not necessarily always reviewed by kind of the usual suspects of music critic publications like Pitchfork and Consequence and a Stereo Gum and things like that. So that's what I do. I do read the reviews as well, and sometimes I read the reviews to discover the record or to kind of give me an idea of what to expect, or how it's being received. Trying not to let it give me too much preconceptions about it. But that's the thing, is like a lot of country records, like Music Row, formulaic country records, don't get reviewed by or talked about by those mainstream publications. For better or for worse, it depends who you talk to. Maybe it's a different audience, but maybe that depends on if the label feels like the album wants to have more of that universal appeal or be exposed to that general public audience.
Yeah.
So Golden Hour got reviewed by everybody pretty much, like for just to compare, for example, the biggest country star in the world right now is Ella Langley. You can listen to her first album, but her first album was not reviewed by, as far as I'm aware of, was not reviewed by Pitchfork, was not reviewed by Consequence Sound. You have to go into very specific country music critic publications to read about how the record was received. You know? So that's, I think, in general, from my experience, how I gauged with how popular this record was. And I mean, they had tons of copies at Grimey's record shop here in East Nashville. The funny thing is I bought a copy and it made noise. It was a fluke. Fluke record. And
so you had to take it back?
I took it back, and
oh my God.
and they did it was like, I think it was within the 3 or 4 days, and I took it back.
Wow.
and I just did a direct exchange,
Yeah, you just got one that was just printed strange.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it made
Weird.
noise through the whole thing, and it was like,
oh man,
it's definitely not supposed to sound like this. So fun. I just remember that as I'm talking about it.
What a weird little tidbit. Yeah. That's what I love about. That's honestly what I love about this podcast. It's not just like the music that's on the records. It's like the experience of getting the record and like where you got it and how it was. All right, we're jumping in now.
Yes.
Let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about the actual tracks on this record. First, favorite song right off the bat. I think we have the same one. Should we say it on 3?
I don't know if we have the same one.
Really?
Well, actually,
I thought we did.
No, we did. We do.
Ready?
We absolutely. Yep. 3, 2, 1. Love is a wild thing.
Which that was my favorite track. That was your favorite track
that
before
was my
we
favorite
ever
track.
met.
Mm-hmm.
And that song is not a single. It's not a song that ever gets talked about. Like, it is a deep cut on this record.
And it's a deep cut she still performs occasionally, every now and then. I don't understand why it was never a single. And plenty of people I know also have championed this song, and it really stands out, because I think amongst other songs on here like Slow Burn and Butterflies, which kind of, and Lonely Weekend there, but you also have like Oh What a World and Mother, which kind of go into each other. They're very, and Happy and Sad, Velvet Elvis, Wonder Woman are also very similar production wise, structurally and musically. And Love Is a Wild Thing just kind of feels like this really nice break in between.
Yeah,
and
like
before Space Cowboy.
When I listened to Love Is a Wild Thing, when I remember listening to that and being like, that is a hit song. Like, I just love like the way it's written. Like, you talk about that formula, right? And like the way it's written, it's like, oh my gosh, that just hits like all the songwriting points you ever want to hit when you try and sit down and write a song. Like, it just feels good. I really think and I was not there. I have no idea. But the reason I think it wasn't a single and it wasn't ever promoted the way I would have promoted it, I think it's just because it's a great song. But like all her other songs there's something really different about it. And I don't necessarily think Love Is a Wild Thing is a different song. I just think it's like great country folk songwriting at its finest. Mm-hmm. But they're like, when you compare that to Velvet Elvis, I've never heard the idea of Velvet Elvis before. I've never heard Space Cowboy the way that she portrayed that before. Love Is a Wild Thing, it's just a phenomenal song.
I am looking at the track list, and it looks like it's the longest song on the record.
Oh, maybe that was why.
At 4:16.
Yeah. That affects things, totally.
Which is funny because...
Especially in that, in 2018, 2019.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of funny.
Makes sense.
That's why it's kind of funny, And... yeah, there's just something very euphoric about that song, and maybe that's because it's in the key of B flat, which to me is like one of my favorite
the perfect
keys.
Key.
that one,
we're such nerds.
To me, it's the perfect key. I also like songs of D major, but I digress. But yeah, no, absolutely love the song. That's my favorite. Space Cowboy, of course, like I said before, that's my favorite.
That's your second. So when you said you thought we had different favorites, was it because you were thinking of Space Cowboy? What was your other one that you were considering to be your favorite?
Well, I will say that Space Cowboy was my first favorite because that was the single. Sure. And then because Love Is a Wild Thing wasn't a single, I didn't hear that until I heard the record, and that became my favorite.
Yeah.
But the other one that was my favorite even before that, because it was a single, was High Horse.
I love High Horse.
Yeah.
I love the production on High Horse. Like, I think it's just such, like, I listen to that song, I'm like, this just feels cool. Like, it's a whole vibe.
It's this perfect country disco BG.
It feels like John Wayne to me.
Yeah.
If he was in a disco bar.
That's the lyric of it.
I know, but it
it's
feels like that.
But it's a gay John Wayne, though.
It is it's like if John Wayne walked into the Lipstick Lounge in Nashville.
And if he was actually gay, too.
Yeah. Yeah. If John Wayne was a drag queen.
That's right. That's right.
It would be.
That's what we're talking.
High Horse.
That's right. Something like that.
I mean, like, what a vibe.
Yeah.
What a vibe.
Yeah, it's this sort of Bee Gees disco country thing, which actually, funnily enough, is much more frequent than you might think. There's this whole kind of heritage of country disco, and which is being carried on by Sturgill Simpson, aka Johnny Blue Skies. Listen to that new album.
And prediction, phenomenal. You heard it here first. I think Ella Langley's going to have a lot of that in her upcoming record.
There's definitely a lot of 80s.
There's a lot of 80s happening.
80s happening in her record. So I would be very interested to see if she incorporates some, disco funk dance elements in that too, which is always a welcome thing. But yeah, I loved I also listened to High Horse incessantly.
High Horse is one of your favorites?
When it was came out as a single.
The song I remember taking over the world at the time was Slow Burn.
Slow Burn, it's funny because that was never my favorite. It was never one of my like top favorites that I listened to repeatedly. But that's definitely the song that I think, the more you listen to it, the better it gets,
It's a slow burn.
That's right.
I loved that Slow Burn was the start of the record.
Yes.
Because to me that song is an autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
This is who I am as an artist.
Absolutely.
Which we hadn't heard so explicitly from Kacey before that. I mean, I don't.
In some ways we have.
In some ways, yeah. But that song is like very like,
I mean,
let
yeah.
me tell you who I am. And to start your whole record like that, I thought was quite a statement and a really nice setup.
The closest I remember songs that kind of touched on that in the past from her were Merry-Go-Round and Dime Store Cowgirl.
Yeah.
You know, because of her talking about where she... Well, that was more of her talking about where she was from, where Slow Burn is more of like more internal, more introspective.
Yeah. It felt like a diary entry.
Mm-hmm. And we get that sort of starting off very introspective, and then from Lonely Weekend to Butterflies we transition into this sort of coming from, because she was before, I believe, in a long-term relationship with the guitarist from her band, one of the guitarists from her band up to that point before Golden Hour came out, and then that fizzled. And then it was, I don't think it was actually long after that is when she met Rustin. And so from Lonely Weekend to Butterflies is that transition, I think, from sort of that, you know, alone period into falling in love again, or starting to fall in love again. And it goes from there. Oh, What a World is kind of that it talks about that euphoria, and Mother is nostalgic, and then Love is a Wild Thing is sort of the peak of it, you know.
I want to talk about Mother.
Yeah.
Because Mother, like, if you have to pick the most surprising track, it's Mother.
Well,
and if it's not Mother for anybody, I think you're wrong. Like, that's how strong I feel about that.
So I remember reading the interviews, and she says she wrote it on an acid trip.
Well, it sounds like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it just a solo write? First
no,
off,
no, it's
Mother,
a co-write. It's a co-write, but she
Mother
might have had,
is bizarre.
But she might have had the bulk of the song, you know, pretty much intact. But it's a very short song. It's only a minute and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
a minute and 20 seconds. Excuse me.
And when you were saying earlier, this record feels like a song cycle. Mother is the reason why.
Yeah,
because it's short. It's just there to fill like this moment. If you listen to Mother by itself, it doesn't make sense. But in the context of the record, it is, to me, one of the things that makes this record so wonderful. Like the way that piano part is at the very end, like, oh, it's just artistic gold. It's so freaking cool.
I think, if I remember correctly, maybe it was her and her producer, one of her producers, were on the acid trip together, so then they wrote the song. So that would make sense.
You know, whatever you need to do.
Don't exactly quote me on that. Look up for yourself, because we're going a little, just a tiny bit off the cuff. But the other song cycle I think exists in the song is the hat trick of Happy Sad, Velvet Elvis, and Wonder Woman, because they all share a lot of the same DNA musically and production.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? The melodies are similar, but the lyrics are what make them each distinct from each other. But you know, like that kind of thing has always been around pretty much as long as popular music has been around in the 20th century. You know, even
and then,
predating
of course,
that. You know.
The other song we have to mention, because it's just another perfect song on this record, is Rainbow.
Yes.
It's a perfect song. I don't care what anybody says.
It is. And it's one of the all-time great closing tracks to a record. And the most interesting thing I think about that song is that song kind of retroactively became partly an anthem for the LGBTQ community, which Kacey has always had a very strong and symbiotic relationship with that audience, which I think
is beautiful.
It is, and I think that's also part of how this record has that universal appeal. Because let's be honest for a moment, you know, the country music industry is very, for lack of better words, very rigid, and doesn't always go out of its way to expand its audience, you know, whether have artists that you know write songs or make music that have that more expansive, broader appeal. You know, most of it very much appeals to a very specific demographic, you know, for you know,
and that's not a bad thing.
It's not a good.
It's just like it's what it is, right? Like country music it came from a specific demographic of people, and it's written for a specific demographic of people.
And we're talking like modern country to be exact, you know.
Yeah.
Because the roots of country kind of, there's a lot more to that, but in terms of like country pop in the country music row industry, you know, it is that, you know, there's not as much of a, they don't focus on that as much, you know, more or as much as probably would like to.
Yeah, I think as a country artist, as a folk artist, like you think a lot about the people that you're trying to represent in your songs. And for me, that's a lot of where I come from, which is a very rural part of America. And I think sometimes in being focused on representing that part, you don't represent it doesn't have as strong of a mass appeal like pop does. And right. So, but I think like for me, and I think a lot of other artists, they're not necessarily, you know, being gatekeepy about it. I think they're just trying to represent where they're from very well. But I think that's what makes Kacey so great, is she really invited a very wide audience into her world.
I do think
very naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think some artists are necessarily gatekeeping either. You know, I think, you know, there's discussions about if the industry is not, but that also kind of exists in a lot of different genres and fields. I mean, that existed in rock music for the longest time.
Oh yeah,
too,
totally.
You know? So
I mean, we have a joke. I had somebody comment on one of my videos like a couple months ago and was like, "This isn't real country," and you know, I kind of looked at Slice and I said, "I've made it," because it's kind of part of it. Is somebody, I think a lot of people put a lot of parameters around what is country and who does it serve, and there seems to be a lot of rules that I don't want those rules.
And sometimes those rules, quote unquote, can seem a bit arbitrary in the first place, you know. The album was successful. It was successful in the country charts. The other thing to understand though around that point was when Tomatogate happened too, which basically revealed how little female country artists get played on country radio. And that's not just like, you know, outsider-ish type of artists like Kacey. This is just every female country artist across the board, you know.
Yeah.
Because those songs, you know, didn't really get played on country radio, you know. They got played a little bit on pop radio, a tiny bit, but, you know, they were still successful. The album was still successful regardless because people bought the album and they streamed it. I think a lot of people, that was the thing about when I said I went to go buy the vinyl record, is like a lot of people bought the physical album.
Yeah.
Which like, it seems like that's why we're talking about it. That's the thing. Is like
that matters. That matters more than anything.
Well, just by virtue of like I own it on vinyl, and for a reason, you know. And I don't say that about like every country artist or even every Americana artist. You know, this is something that, you know, for me is bigger than the genre it came from itself. You know,
right?
Which is the reason why I've always loved it, and I've always been down to, you know, discuss it and why we're talking about it here, you know.
Yeah.
And
can I also say something about kind of it's a little bit of a tangent of this record, but I do think one of the reasons why people bought this record is because the artwork on the vinyl is so beautiful. If you haven't seen it, it's just this bright blue sky. Kacey has this beautifully pink fan in front of her face. Like, it's such like a piece of art. And if you don't know, her sister photographs all of her artwork, and I just think that is so sweet and cool. Like,
it's a very iconic album cover.
Yeah,
you know, in a way that, you know, a lot of country records don't look like that.
And I
don't
just
look
think
like that. Their album covers don't look like that.
I think it looks beautiful. I think that's why a lot of people wanted to actually like own it, is because it's just like, it is a beautiful vinyl. It just really is, like, from cover to the way they did the record. Like, it's just a very beautiful package. And I do think that affects why somebody would want it in their home, on their shelf, you know?
Absolutely. And going back to the track list a little bit, you know, in terms of the singles, the one that I think became sort of the sleeper was because I think Rainbow was the last single, but the single that came out before that was Golden Hour.
Yeah.
It was a single.
Yeah, and it's funny. I always think of Golden Hour a little bit as the sleeper song. I think every song is actually perfect on this record. But yeah, that song to me, it's when I think about this record, I don't ever think about the song Golden Hour,
Yeah.
but I love that it's the title of the record.
Actually, let me rephrase. It was not released as a single, but I think on Streamy it is one of the higher streamed songs.
Golden Hour?
Yeah, it's the title track. It comes out at the towards the very end, right before Rainbow. So, I think initially it wasn't necessarily the song everybody talked about, even though that's the name of the freaking album.
Yeah.
But that's also just, I think, kind of a nice sort of thematic sum up of the whole record.
Yeah, like I think obviously I love records like this. I did this with my record Lost. Like Lost is a track, but when you name the whole work that, it changes the meaning of that word. I feel the same way about Golden Hour. Like that title is the perfect title for this record. It's just every song feels the way you feel like when you hit Golden Hour, when you walk outside and it's Golden Hour, and everything feels like it has this like magical glow on it. That's how every song on this record feels. And so I just love it as a title. And then I think the song itself is just like, it feels the way I want it to feel.
I remember the feeling when I really listened to it. It was in that sort of moment in the year when spring turns to summer.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the perfect music that I think encapsulates that.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole record is a vibe, and I just want to like live in the vibe with this record.
Absolutely.
This is one of the very few, I'm not a repeat album person a lot, actually. I'm kind of not either, especially especially when it comes to most newer records. Which I feel like that's a very like, I don't know. That's a very us thing. I feel like that might be a very musician thing. I feel like most people have their favorite records, and like as people who are constantly putting out music, you're just like trying to be one of those records someone wants to listen to over and over again, because it's hard. People have like 10 records that they listen to over and over again. I really don't do that. This is one of the very few records I listen to over and over again. It's like, because a lot of times when I'm listening to something, I actually don't listen to a lot of music, which is probably really surprising for people.
Well, I think that's kind of normal for some artists, honestly. I think the other hurdle is that there's like too many options too. Like, you have all the music readily available, and it's like you gotta like kind of pick which ones you're dedicated to, or you want to go out of your way to listen. Because for every 10 times you listen to one album, you could have been listening to 9 more albums.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's that and that's very much a current thing. That's more of a problem now, is like, having too many options, which is, again, not necessarily completely thing good or thing bad. It just depends what you do with it. And I struggle with that, because that's why even I listen to a lot of new albums. I usually only listen to them through once.
Right.
Only twice if I really, really am feeling a very personal connection with it. Because that's the thing. For me, I can listen to an album and say, this is a great album, this is a great record, but then on the other side is, do I feel like I'm personally connecting with the music, with the lyrics,
Yeah. And I mean, this record for me is the one that I put on in the morning when I want my day to start off well. Like, this is the record when I don't want to have to like analyze anything. I just love the way this record makes me feel.
Yeah, and I think that's part of its general broad appeal, is that you just listen to it and you're not having to, nothing draws attention to itself more than anything else. So you're focusing on everything, but it creates that effect.
Yeah.
With doing that as well.
So one thing I love about Kacey as a whole is there was this saying that people used to say, like, if you don't like country music, listen to Kacey Musgraves. She's the artist that people who don't like country will like. It's just kind of funny. And so I'm curious about this record and maybe about her, like, if you think that's accurate, why you think that is.
Again, I think part of that, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I remember I remember there was some discussion about that at the time, and there's certain records that get discussed like that too, like Sturgill Simpson's catalog gets into that. And I will even use Jason Isbell as an example because he is very much not a Music Row artist by any stretch of the imagination, but his albums chart on on the country chart.
Totally.
So, there's some credibility there, but I think it all comes down to them. They're just talking about things that don't get talked about in country pop music. I think that's what it comes down to. I think regardless of the production, regardless of the musical influences, and regardless even sometimes of the voice. Like, I'm just saying, we live in this era of Post Malone and Jelly Roll doing the country thing, for better or for worse, and no one in the industry bats an eye, you know what I mean?
Yeah, nobody says anything about that.
But that's because lyrically they're talking about the things that are very popular to talk about in country pop, and they're doing it in a way that's
a formula.
They're doing it in a way that's very much in that style, which Kacey has done in some ways, even on previous records. But on this one, she's not talking about trucks and beer or these days what gets talked about, which is being saved by God. She talks about being saved by drugs, but
gosh, we should edit that out.
If you know, you know. If you know, you know.
Oh god.
But
oh my lord.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line with it. I think that's the bottom line of
it's just very honest.
It's very honest, and it avoids, if it doesn't avoid cliche, it really does something sincere with it, which is how you kind of get away with it,
right?
In my opinion.
Well, like when I have people tell me I don't like country music, which happens a lot, to be honest. I mean, that's happened my whole life. Whether that's in reference to like, I don't want to listen to your music because I don't like country music. And there's that's not a bad conversation. That's just a conversation you have.
Yeah.
Or, I remember my really good friend in college, she's like, why do you listen to country music? Like, I don't like country music. And I'm like, I promise you're listening to the wrong thing. Because especially in our current music landscape, like, we don't have a great lane for just singer-songwriters. We really don't.
Because it either gets lumped in with, typically gets lumped in with Americana and or folk.
And that now crosses into country. A lot of people will hear, like, Jesse Wells, who's an Americana artist kind of through and through, and they're like, this
folk.
is country.
But then I say, like, well, that's more folk,
Right.
But that's sort of.
But this is us who, like, we do this every day. But I'm talking about somebody who's just like, they're an accountant and they love music, and they heard Jesse Wells on the radio. They would probably say that's country.
Yeah, they say it's country. They say it's folk. It becomes arbitrary to a certain point.
It doesn't matter. And I think back in the 90s there was adult alternative stations for kind of singer-songwriters. We don't have that anymore.
It used to be like adult alternative, adult contemporary, which kind of still exists in some way, but not from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, I really feel like you have two lanes as true singer-songwriters, and that is either bedroom pop, or that is
which is like pop, which is pop,
but it's pop, a specific.
Well, it's pop or indie pop.
It's kind of like Taylor Swift had a few things that were kind of in that lane, or it is country, folk, Americana. Like, those are your lanes. If you're really truly like, and I feel this deeply, I guess I'm talking about myself a little bit. If you're really truly what comes out of you, because I don't think that you can fake what music naturally comes out of you. Like, if you naturally make singer-songwriter, autobiographical, here's my journal, put to music, your two lanes naturally either are kind of bedroom pop or country, folk, Americana.
But I think
one of those two.
But I think to your point, that the bottom line is that this Kacey record, Golden Hour, is a singer-songwriter record.
It's a singer-songwriter
At the end of the day, it's a singer-songwriter record.
More than anything else.
Regardless of the sounds or influences or mixes of those influences, it is. One more thing I'll say to that is that I think when people talk about they don't like country music, I think part of that is also the country music culture.
Which I get.
Yeah, a lot of people
There are
don't.
some corners that I don't want to hang in.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really jive with that, and the music is kind of a byproduct of that in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of examples and terms that get tossed around and thrown around, some very accurate, some a little, maybe a little nuanced, but it is there, and this record, I think, proved that you didn't have to necessarily be a part of that, or if you can make a record that's honest and good and in the moment of what you feel like you're exploring musically and songwriting wise, then it's going to be successful.
I love it. I love it so much. All right. Well, we always end with the same 2 questions. And that is, why does Golden Hour matter to the culture? And why should someone listen to this record? Why would you pick it up, put it on your shelf, the whole 9 yards?
So we alluded quite a bit to how Golden Hour is very important to the culture.
Yeah.
Although I think we did focus mostly on how it appealed to the country culture and why it went so much against the grain.
I think there's a clear before and after.
There is, absolutely. Well, there was
in country music for sure. There's a before and after. I don't think you get Zach Bryan in country music before after.
Well, I think there was a lot of factors that played into that around the time. Again, Sturgill Sayers' Sky to Earth, Tomato Gate, Brandy Carlisle's kind of climb too. There was all these things happening at once, but the same conversations were happening at the same time of why country music has to be, beholden to a specific industry, to a specific formula. Why can't outsiders make what they want to make and still be considered that or be a part of that? Regardless, I think, of what is considered country or not country, enough quotation marks. Again, that tends to be arbitrary. So what this album really did, I think, was subvert those discussions and prove that this could be an extremely commercially successful and viable product and piece of art at the same time, that you can make music regardless of where you come from, but especially if you come from a country background, you can be more than what that genre or industry formula wants to be beholden to. And it made a great impact on music as well. I think it maybe in some ways did become sort of a gateway for more artists to get into country music, to get into those different influences that influenced Kacey, whether they are older ones like Willie Nelson or Vince Gill or otherwise. I think it did make a great impact, and I think mainstream wise it definitely became a cornerstone for country's popularity in the mainstream. At least for that moment. And I think in some ways, some of that has changed in a way that probably is not done in the same way Kacey did it. So for better or worse, but it really made an impact at that time for sure.
Yeah.
And to the second question, which was,
why would someone listen to it?
Why would someone listen to it? It's just a great listen. It's just an enjoyable listen, whether you're listening actively or passively. And
I can't think of many people who wouldn't enjoy this record.
Right. And it's a record for everybody, really. Yeah. It is a record for everybody, regardless of musically what you're into or what you're not into. There's just something for everybody. And it's a very positive record,
Yeah, it is. It really is.
It's a very positive record. And especially nowadays, we need definitely more positive records or positive leaning records. And
you walk away feeling good.
Yes, you walk away feeling good. There's a sense of euphoric satisfaction to this album.
I remember a quote, and I can't remember who it was at the time this record came out. It was somebody I really respected, and they just said, I'm putting this record right next to my Joni Mitchell record. And that has just always kind of lived with me. I think when we get through the next 50 years and we go back and we say, what were some of the most influential records of our time. I think this is going to be in the top 10. I really do. Of our time period, of what affected the artists who came after it. For me, this was a life-changing record in terms of the art I create, in terms of just as a person. I think it spoke to a lot of feelings I've never heard another person be able to put into words, which I think is kind of the goal of being an artist, is to give words to feelings that people can't. But I don't know. I really do think that this will be a very culturally significant record, even the farther we get from it.
And I agree with that in terms also of Kacey's creative output since then. Because like we said before, unfortunately her and Rustin were divorced, and she made the divorce record, which
right after this record, which is kind of...
Well, it's like 2 years after.
But her next record. Yeah.
Yeah, which I did not care for that record. But, it was just kind of her artistic journey, and then Deeper Well, of course, which was a very good record.
I loved that record.
And now she's kind of sort of back in that land of songwriting-wise of her first couple records.
She's teasing a new record. This episode might come out really close to...
Yeah, about the time she's revving up her next album, Middle of Nowhere. So she's always been a very interesting artist in the sort of creative approach in terms of songwriting. In terms of songwriting.
I just feel like Kacey, the reason why people look up to her is she's just an artist that's never been afraid to go there. Never been afraid to explore something new, something different, a different kind of sound, a different kind of production, a different kind of lyric style. Mm-hmm. And that's why she is who she is. That's why she's influenced so many people.
Precisely. Well, thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of Home Records. If you like what you've been hearing, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are available.
If you'd like to show your support, please give us a 5-star review and be sure to spread the word to all your friends, family,
and enemies.
Thank you guys again, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.